Hello, and welcome to the Damage Prevention Council 2012 OSHA Update. My name is George Oaksis. I'm the Area Director for the OSHA office in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and with me today is Jim Lutz. Jim is what we call a Compliance Assistance Specialist. He is also out of the Milwaukee area office. So today we're going to talk a little bit about one, public sector update or public sector employee protections. Two, we'll talk about a couple of accidents which have occurred in the state of Wisconsin, and unfortunately one of them resulted in the death of a worker. Three, we'll talk a little bit about maintaining safe distances from power lines when doing trenching, excavating, or other types of work. We'll talk a little bit about new rules which OSHA has which affect the construction industry. And then we'll talk about what our compliance officers have been finding out in the field with regard to trenching and excavating. And lastly, we'll provide some resources for additional information to enhance your safety and health program.
A couple of changes have occurred over the last year for our public sector workers here in the state of Wisconsin. Number one, we had the new Department of Safety and Professional Services established, where your public sector inspectors have moved to. They're still in the Safety and Buildings Division, but it's actually within that new department. Some of the changes involving the regulation of COM 32, Public Sector Employee Safety and Health. The department is now going to be looking at adopting the 2010 OSHA standards rather than relying on the old 2003 standards. We've provided an information sheet at the Diggers Hotline or Excel Energy tables. For if you do have questions on safety and health in the public sector, you can contact your local inspector or contact the program supervisor directly in Madison. George, let's talk about that accident that happened up in the Fox Valley this last year.
Okay, Jim. Unfortunately, this is one that did result in a fatality. Employees were installing some fiber optic cable, and with the use of a horizontal directional drilling machine. Well, unfortunately, as work progresses, they kind of lose the cutter head with respect to it. So, got to retrieve it. So what do? We dig a trench. Depending on where the cutter head is, it depends on how deep it is and how fast we can get to it. So in this case, they did utilize a trench shield. However, keep in mind that this depth was about 10 feet deep. Unfortunately, the trench shield they used was 8 foot in length, but only 6 feet in depth. So that leaves 3 to 4 feet above the top of the shield. Unfortunately, what happened is that enough protection was not provided, such as cutting back the sides of the trench above the shield or providing additional means of support, and it caved in. 2 people were in the trench. One escaped with minor injuries, bruises, and scratches. The second, unfortunately, suffered blunt force trauma to the chest. Last year, we talked about a method of trench protection called a trench shield or a trench box. Today, we're going to demonstrate and talk a little bit about one of the support systems, hydraulic shoring. Some people will call it speed shoring. This is a system which can be utilized that actually prevents a cave-in. Unlike a shield system protects against the effects of a cave-in. In and of itself would not necessarily stop the cave-in from happening. One of the advantages of having a speed shoring system or aluminum shores is that they can be affixed, they can be put into the system without putting people into danger, generally from the top down. Again, people will take chances because it's only going to take a minute or so to perform the act. Well, let's put it to you this way. A couple of well-trained people could put this shoring system in what, a matter of 5 minutes. Now, bear in mind, you're down on your hands and knees in this part of the trench which collapsed. How long would it take to dig the body out? Here's how we've demonstrated the ramp. Again, we've got a ladder to access and egress the trench if so needed, but also we can use an earthen ramp for protection. Again, as I said earlier, the criteria isn't just we backfill it and let you scramble on up. Here is one which has actually been prepared. You note the slope. You can walk up and down on 2 feet, not on all fours. This was compacted. As you walk 2 steps up, you're not taking 1 step back. So this would be a properly designed earthen ramp for access and egress. Bear in mind, every 25 foot of lateral trench requires a means of access and egress. It's important that we know what type of soil we're working with. And that's why it's required that we do a test before selecting a method of protection. That test will include a couple of things. One, a visual, taking a look at what the soil conditions are and what situations we have around it. And the second is to do an actual physical test. This could be a number of factors. One of the tools which can be used, which is a pocket penetrometer. And this will give the unconfined compressive strength of the soil. From that now we can determine what type of shoring we'll need, how far apart they need to be spaced, whether we need a whale system, whether we need tight sheeting in addition to the support systems.
Did you know that on a nationwide basis, 2 workers are killed every month in trench collapses? OSHA's national office has developed a new informational poster on trench safety. Copies of the poster can be downloaded through the OSHA website, or you can get a copy from your local area office.
George, the second accident happened with an employee digging around a 480-volt service line that went into a business. Can you tell us about that case?
Yeah, I can. Unfortunately, this happens all too often. Give you a little background on the case. This was a situation where they were, again, going to directionally drill and pull back some fiber optic cable. Yes, they called Diggers Hotline. Yes, the utility was marked. Yes, the utility was uncovered. We now found the hotline. That's all we need to do. Well, in the process of clearing the lines, we're still using the sharp metal tip spade to clear the debris and material away, thinking that the one line is all. Well, unfortunately, this was on a 3-phase system and there were additional hot lines underground. So as you can well imagine, as you're cutting through the soil with a sharp implement, contact was made with the energized line. Fortunately, the worker received a shock but wasn't killed. What we have here was a situation where we have uncovered, where we know that there is utilities. Extreme care must be used, and I'll use the term soft digging techniques in and around those areas to prevent such a thing from occurring.
Were the workers wearing any personal protective equipment?
Well, outside of the hard hat and safety glasses, they weren't wearing any protection with respect to electrical protection. Now, bear in mind, gloves were provided with the appropriate dielectric properties. What we find in a lot of places their use wasn't enforced by the employer. So they're digging, didn't want to wear them out or what have you, and we're not handling the electrical lines, so we don't need them. So yeah, the gloves were available with the appropriate insulating properties, but unfortunately were not used.
As long as we're talking about electricity, be sure to maintain clear distances with digging equipment. If you work close to power lines, use a spotter to help operators prevent contact. Using cranes around power lines mandates that precautionary measures be used at 20 feet. But if a crane is traveling without a load, it may be closer. Always be sure to identify a safe travel path and use it. Some recognized safe practices to use on the job when working around power lines include: be certain to maintain a safe clearance when the bed of a dump truck is raised. Know the minimum distance a crane can operate safely near a power line. Keep all parts of the crane and its load outside of this area. Designate a worker to be responsible for signaling the equipment operator when any part of the equipment used or its load approaches the minimum clearance limit. And workers should never touch equipment while working around power lines. The only new standard having an impact on the construction industry this year is the new requirement on rigging equipment. Equipment must have permanent, legible markings prescribed by the manufacturer that indicate the recommended safe working load. Slings are not to be used without affixed, legible identification markings. Steel chain slings, plow steel wire rope and wire rope slings, as well as natural and synthetic fiber rope slings, cannot be used for loads in excess of the rated capacity indicated on the marking or tag. Wire rope slings must have permanent and legible markings attached. The markings must identify the size, rated capacity for the type or types of hitch or hitches used, the angle upon which it is based, and the number of legs if more than one is used. The top 5 violations compliance officers found this past year in trenching and excavated include: number 1, no protective measures or no protective systems utilized for workers in trenches or excavations. Number 2, no effective means of egress from the trench or excavation. Number 3, soil or materials, including the spoil pile, not located at least 2 feet from the edge of an excavation or a trench. Anticipated loads exceeded the trench shield design limitations. And number 5, excavations, protective systems, adjacent areas were not inspected by a competent person. It should be noted that almost half of the number 1 most frequently cited violation, no protective system being utilized, resulted in willful penalties issued to employers. For further information on excavation safety, OSHA provides a variety of resources through its webpage, and that would be at www.osha.gov, or through specific training programs offered through the Susan Harwood Grant Program. In addition, OSHA and the American Pipeline Contractors Association has developed a fact sheet identifying excavation best practices for equipment operators and workers. You can also implement safe digging practices as suggested by the Common Ground Alliance. In addition, we provided an updated copy of the excavation safety handout at the tables this year. If you have any questions about trenching safety or any safety issue, please contact your local OSHA office.
In closing, we'd like to thank the Diggers Hotline, the Damage Prevention Council, Time Warner Cable, We Energies, and KS Energies for making this video possible. Without their help, this couldn't be done, and hopefully lives can be saved. So, I'm George Oaksis, and please have a safe year. Thank you.